I'm Marley DeFrucio. I'm the Director of Operations for Level Up EQ. I help Marla run the operational side of the company, and today I will also be running the operational side of the event. And I'd like to officially welcome and get everything started for our panel discussion today on coaching for organizational and employee impact. And I'm actually going to introduce our moderator today, who's going to be a little different. If you've been following us for these events, our moderator is actually going to be David Skibbins today, as Marla is going to be part of our panel. So David Skibbins is actually going to be is our head of coaches at Level Up EQ. And he's a really intelligent, wonderful man. He has a PhD in psychology, was in psychotherapy for decades, and has been coaching for over 20 years. He's also a senior faculty member at CTI and is currently working towards his MFA in creative writing and is a really avid Dungeons and Dragons player. And I'm going to let him take it from here.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here. So I just want to say one thing before we start, which is I was a psychotherapist for a long time, and then I became an organizational consultant for a while and kind of got discouraged with both of those because I didn't see real change happening. And it wasn't until I discovered coaching that I discovered this was the secret sauce that could help someone make that step from learning new behavior to actually integrating it into their life and being able to change the way that they are in their workplace and in their life from what they've learned. So I'm a passionate coach, and we have some people that have deeply appreciated coaching today with in our panel with us, and also another passionate coach who I happen to know pretty well. We also are going to be conducting a poll. Marley is going to have a poll being launched, and in your questions that you asked and in those poll moments, you'll have the opportunity to sort of, with us, organically create this workshop. So with that in mind, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and I'll begin with Amy. Hello, Amy.
Sorry, my audio cut out. Hi, I'm Amy Parker. I am the head of global learning for a company based out of Boston called Acquia. We're a digital experience technology company, and we are approximately 1,200 people worldwide, operating in about 33 different countries. And I'm an avid scuba diver, so I can't go head to head with you on the Dungeons and Dragons, but I do think that, you know, we might have something to talk about in terms of
we can go into depth around
nice fun. Very well done.
All right. And Marla Skibbins, how about introducing yourself?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Marla Skibbins. I am the founder of Level Up EQ, and I am also, as you know, an executive coach. And I'll talk to you from that place about my intro, which is I've been coaching since the 90s. I am, and I think this is an important distinction, I am a certified coactive coach. So I have been trained in coaching skills, and then I bring that together with my understanding of business. And I've been coaching executives in tech and biotech for the last 16 years. And have also been on faculty at one of the largest coach training organizations, which is called the Coaches Training Institute, or now called Coactive. And I, at my heart, believe and live for transformation of human beings, of teams, of systems, of organizations, and transformation to the next best version of themselves. That's really what I see coaching is an opportunity to help all those different spots in whether you're an individual contributor or team or organization, transform to be the next best level. And I have been pulled into Dungeons and Dragons by my beloved husband. And then I also am a rock climber. So,
and a jeweler.
Yeah. And
okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Marla. Paul, you're on.
Yeah. Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Very well.
Okay, good. My name is Paul Bickford. I'm the Global Director of Sales Enablement at LucidWorks, and I'm also the President of Transformative Sales Solutions in LLC, where I do work on the side. And I'm a founding member and past member, chapter president of the Sales Enablement Society. Was a past chapter officer of the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. And I teach leadership development and sales skills. And so one of the things I find is really important, you talked about the secret sauce, David, and I always explain it as that is the managers doing the coaching. And so who's coaching the managers? And we'll get deeper into the details there. But I find we spend so much time talking about strategy when things fall apart in the tactics, and we falsely will go back and look at doing a different strategy where it's like who was going to do what by when and who owned it and who was coaching performance. And that's a lot of times the performance management framework just doesn't exist. And so I bring that to the organizations that I work with, and I've been able to train and enable 10,000 people over the last 15 years all over the world through different means and channels.
Wow, that's a nice number. Congratulations. That's a big impact in the world. So I'm going to begin with both you personally, because I think all of you have received coaching, and you as manager, team leader, executive within an organization. What is your experience with internal coaching and with external coaching? In other words, from within the organization, if you've been a part of that, or from having someone come in from the outside. What's your experience, and what impact did that have on you personally and on your team? I know that's a bunch of questions. It's basically I'm throwing out some bait for you to step into the idea about what impact has coaching had with you. So anyone can start. Or I'll just call on Marla since no one's jumping in.
Okay. Well, I'll speak to that from having been a coach within an organization, both individually and with teams. So you're wanting to hear what the impact is of that. Yeah. I think for individuals, we have to start with the I. I think Paul said that really well. We go back to looking at, well, what went wrong with the strategy, but often the human being and the way they are within the team and how they are accountable makes a huge difference. And so as a coach, coaching individuals in a system, when they start to change, things start to change around them. When they see the system differently, or the people they report to, or their cross-functional peers, when they have a behavior change that has them see things differently, the system changes around them. So I think that individual coaching, when people can take responsibility for themselves and their impact, makes a huge change in a system. Likewise, when a system, a team, a one-on-one, an organization is able to step outside of the system and look at, are we behaving the way we want to be together? Are we accountable to one another? Are we able to trust one another? When a system can do that, when they can actually have awareness of how are we behaving together, that's when results get turbocharged, because the systems will keep an individual who's changing stuck. But when the system changes, then huge things can happen.
All kinds of interesting things.
Yeah. Yes. Great. True. Yes. What would you two say?
Well, I would say, thinking about what you talked about, you reminded me of two things, Marla. One is, there's a talk that I do, I call the anatomy of performance. And when I sometimes speak at conferences or work with groups, where you need three things to do a job. You need skill, will, and ability. So skill and knowledge can be taught. Will is intrinsic, meaning you have to hire for intrinsic will, that drive. And extrinsic will is based on compensation and quality of leadership. And then ability is, do you have the right talent, and do you have the right tools, resources, and environment to be successful? So I think a lot of times, organizations don't realize all of those things they have to take in, because I have to know what to coach to, because if I'm coaching the wrong individual, or I'm coaching to skill when it's a will issue, I'm putting a Band-Aid on open heart surgery, and I'll come back with a false positive that, oh, well, the coaching didn't work, or, oh, this training didn't work because the trainer wasn't good, or the training wasn't good. And it's like we spend so much time, to use a metaphor, on what's the right recipe, where it's like, did we back up and look at the ingredients? And so the other thing you made me think about is, when you have those conversations, are we talking about lead measures, things that influence results that are happening in the now? or are we talking about lag measures? So in the world of sales, oftentimes we talk about lag measures, what you did last quarter, last year, last month, the deal that didn't close, versus which needs to happen. Lead measures, when you start your workday to when you end your workday, what are you doing during that time? And is it driving results with effectiveness, which is bearing fruit, and efficiency, where you're being time efficient? And again, I feel like oftentimes those things are left out because there's no visibility and there's not an awareness of the need to focus on those things.
Right.
Yeah, that's a
And
great
that's where the wheel hits the ground, more or less. Amy, what's your answer to that question of the impact that you've seen coaching have on individuals within teams?
I think it's really, we call it head, heart, hands. It's really skill, will kind of approach to it. But I think one of the things that I see most frequently is that people enter into a coaching situation not really understanding what they're getting themselves into. They kind of maybe dip their foot in because they were assigned a coach, or they said this is what executives are supposed to do. For me, I think the hardest part is really looking at what is it that not does the organization want to get out of it, but what does the individual, what is their bias for or against coaching to start with? And I think that when we look at it from the, what have I gotten out of it personally as a coach, I get really that level of satisfaction when the light bulb goes off and you realize that that person has found a solution. I'm not giving the solution, but the person intrinsically is finding the solution inside themselves to be able to make that change. And what Marla said is really that human condition and changing. And one thing that I really go back to is, and I put at the forefront of all of my coaching, is that businesses don't change. People make businesses change. And until people are willing to innovate and take risks, and coaching, by the way, can be felt as a big risk to people because you're putting yourself out there to be vulnerable. But my experience has been on both sides as a coach and as a coachee. And I can tell you that it's sometimes a lot easier to coach than it is to walk into that coaching situation and actually put yourself out there to say, I need help.
Right.
And then to be able to sit and back and look at, how do I accept this help? How do I get that will, maybe I'm going at it unwillingly, but how do I open myself up to this? And I think on the opposite side, I think that it's also really important that the coach understands that. So there's a little bit of psychology in it, but I think there's also a lot of human interaction and what is it that you're trying to accomplish is trying to help somebody find a better solution than what they would have found without the coaching opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we all have an inherent desire to be excellent at what we do. And it's like coaching gives us the opportunity to be able to channel that desire and that instinct into skillful behaviors that actually work within an organization.
And I want to dovetail, Amy, one of the things that you, and I think Paul too, I think we have to call to people, and what you're saying, David, call to people's, and this is what creates the impact, I think, is helping them. I call it intrinsic motivation, connect to who do they actually want to be. I'm very much around behavior and internal intrinsic drivers. Who do they actually want to be in the world, and what do they want to cause? And I think that gives them part of the reason why to change, because they get to see where their gap is in how they're actually being and what they want for themselves. And I do think also what creates incredible impact with coaching, both individually and in a team setting, is the feedback. Why do we want, it's hard for someone to go, well, I don't know, why do I want to change? Well, when they get 360 feedback, right, and they're like, oh, wow, I'm not who I thought I was. Yeah. Right. You get some kind of feedback measure from a system. Then they get, and that is a very, like you're saying, Amy, a really vulnerable thing to put yourself out there. But then you really get to see, I know for myself, when I put myself up for 360s and I'm like, oh, okay, ouch. And thank goodness I know that, know.
I know we can go even deeper into this, but I want to take charge and ask another question, because the coaching profession includes a wide range of people, some of them well-trained, some of them not trained at all, some of them trained in one perspective, some of them trained in another perspective. So what kind of skills and attitudes are you looking for that you believe makes a top-level coach? And Amy, I'll start with you. Like, what are those skills and attitudes that you're looking for?
So I think above and beyond all else, it's a high level of emotional intelligence. It's really about being able to, as a coach, understand that you don't have to be the expert in the room. I have a really good friend of mine who coaches an astrophysicist. She is not an astrophysicist. And so being able to have that experience and just step out of your own ego and into that idea that you're trying to put yourself out there from an empathetic perspective and help navigate and set your own perspective aside. I think the second big characteristic that I look for is that I'm not asking the coach. I'm a big believer in coaching people so that they figure out what the solution to the problem is, or even identifying the problem instead of telling them. And for me, I think sometimes that's a bit of a challenge because I'm a teacher by nature. So I want to give them the answer. And so for me, when I think about how do I pick a coach, I want them not to just give me the solution, but I want them to help me foster the journey through the whole discovery process, because foundationally, the first answer is not going to be the right one. The second one isn't, maybe the third one. And the coach has to have that tenacity to hang in with the coachee to be able to help ask the right kinds of questions, to give that person the space and the opportunity to kind of mentally or emotionally explore what might be a solution, and then have the tenacity to say, what else? Yeah. What else? And ask several times to be able to push on that.
Right. That's really important. Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned emotional intelligence, which was something I was going to broach. And you said it in a little bit different way, but the piece around developing people's critical thinking skills and problem solving, and doing question-based coaching, where I'm a big fan of the GROW model, where you already know what you need to do to be great, is one of that author's books, where you're just asking questions to get people to come to the right answer on their own. And it takes a patience, it takes a willingness to be caring and nurturing about the conversation, because it is faster to just say what the issue is. And like at the end of a sales coaching call, what went well? What would you have done differently? What did you think when they said this? What if you had said that instead? How do you think that might have played out? Versus, yeah, this really wasn't great, or this was good, but it'd be better if you said that. Okay, are we done? Ready? Break. And a lot of sales managers want to do that. And so I think the thing too for senior level, because I find for myself in my industry, in the function of selling rather, the gap is between senior sales leaders and sales managers. A lot of times there's a lot spent on the individual contributor coaching, but that management coaching of managers is often left off completely. And I think it's because it's just something that people that are at those levels weren't coached specifically when they were in those jobs, and making sure that there is a performance management framework. And it takes somebody being willing to invest that time in their people and stepping outside of the business to be able to focus on the people, without getting into the minutia of what specifically is going on in the business, and then bringing it back in to apply it. But the last thing I would say that I was reminded of is when we talk about dealing with people, Marla was talking about the human element of that. I always say, think about the way people are compensated, measured, and evaluated, and what their goals are, whether they have a family or what they want to do, who they want to be, and are you asking those questions to find that out, and then using coaching as a vehicle to help them get there, and then you're able to motivate them more because it's something that they want to do for themselves.
I double down on your what you said, Paul, about the managers are never really getting the coaching that they need to, and then that's where my sweet spot is. I've done executive coaching, but I get a lot of, warm and fuzzies. I get a lot of gratification by coaching managers because they have such a powerful impact on the organization, whether they're managing up or whether they're managing their team. And it's true. Some of my biggest repeat customers, if you will, are sales managers, because they're really so focused on the results and not the how, and being able to help sales understand it's not always going to be the force management methodology or the whatever the sales methodology is that's being applied. Sometimes they have to break the rules a little bit because their customers aren't following rules. And so how do you get them to step into that empathetic role with their customers? Well, if they've never had that and they've been taught a specific methodology, it's very hard for them to break away from habits.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll add, do you want me to add in on this question?
Yeah, quick one.
Okay. So, and say the question again.
The skills and attitudes that you're looking for in a top level coach.
So I would begin by saying that they believe that the individual that they're coaching can transform, that they have greatness in them, that they actually see the greatness more than they see the behavior that isn't allowing them to be great, and that they call to that greatness, and that they're a demand, they're a loving presence to that individual's greatness. I used to supervise coaches, and I would say, I can teach you how to ask a powerful question. I can teach you not to give advice, but I can't teach you to believe in someone, and I can't teach you to love someone. And I do believe coaching has an element of that loving presence and also that demand for greatness. It has to have an equal measure of both. And I think, there's this dance as an executive coach of knowing content. And I don't mean the content of the work as it's a financial function or it's a marketing function, not that piece, but how does change happen? What is emotional intelligence? The sound bites that clients may need that you drop into the coaching, but ultimately a coach has to not know for the client. I love, Amy, what you're saying. Keep asking, having rigor around asking the question, right? Because we know, we've seen this. This is not our first rodeo as a coach. And yet letting the client find and I'll say to my clients in our initial onboarding, I have ideas. They are not the best ideas. I want you to recognize, if I ever have an idea, it's something like a spice that you can add or not. And your brilliance is the one that will drive this. And so the coach being willing to self-manage their narcissistic need to be right or to be good or to be helpful, and to really call on that client's innate greatness and their knowingness, because if they're at this level, that they have that. Right. The only other thing I want to add here is I want to make a distinction. There is coach. We come in and coach, or we have an internal coach that comes in, and then we have a coach approach. And you both said this in a different way. And I just want to make that great distinction that I think everyone from an individual contributor to particularly, I see this as individual contributors become managers and leaders for the first time, don't have a distinction on how to be coach for their people, and giving them those skills and there are different leadership skills, obviously, that as you lead people, you need to be able to paint with, but the coach approach is one of them. And it's how we engage our people to become great as well. So I think the same holds true for those skills in a manager or a leader or anywhere in the organization. So,
right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. I wanted to check in with Marley quickly. Did you have some poll results or anything else, some Q&As, anything else that you want to toss into the pot here, Marley?
Yeah, actually, so I'm going to steal the next question from you just because I can, and you're going to enjoy that, David. Great. But I was looking over our poll responses, and it actually looks like a vast majority, and I do mean like well over 50% of folks who are responding mentioned that their organizations don't actually have internal or external coaching programs. So we're looking at an audience right now who has mentioned that they may have received coaching in the past. 41% of folks had said that they worked with external coaches, but not that their organization provides internal or external. And kind of going off of that, we did have some folks, 23% mentioned that their coaching experiences met expectations. not exceeds, but not lower. It met. So from here, I kind of want to jump into our next question, which is how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your coaches and your coaching programs?
Well, I'll jump in. So, you know, for myself, I'll speak at that level. I do a stakeholder-centered coaching. So when I'm individually coaching, so we're creating a coaching plan through feedback. My client decides what they want to work on. And then we meet with stakeholders, usually their boss and somebody within the people function that they feel would be a good fit to help them on their journey. And we look at both a coaching plan to make sure that's fits what the organization's needs are. And also we benchmark where that coachee lands within the mastery scale. And we do that throughout the coaching. We do it at the beginning, middle, and end. And we're scoring scale of 1 to 10. How fully is this coachee hitting mastery on whatever their coaching plan elements are? Communication, executive presence, and there's information that would be a double click there, but you get the sense, right? We are looking, is this person changing, and are the stakeholders giving feedback that the coachee is changing? That's one piece that I think is crucial. That's both information for the coach and it's information for the client. Because if I am hearing midpoint, my coachee is not seen as changing, we need to redesign how we work together to help them step into what's next in their change. So I think that's crucial. Polling throughout the coaching process gives the coachee and the coach information from, you know, a greater net of stakeholders around behavioral change and are the larger audience seeing change within the system.
Yeah,
I think that's another piece. That's crucial.
So Amy, how about in your organization? Like, how do you evaluate whether this was a cost-effective use of your time and energy with your team?
Yeah, I think it depends upon how. Right now, we're just doing individual one-on-one coaching. So we're about to launch a more kind of coaching at scale model. So to be able to democratize the coaching opportunity, it's no longer just at that executive level. So one of those core components is how many people raised their hand and wanted to jump into this experience at all. And then when we think about kind of the frequency and the level of satisfaction that they're getting out of it, we have a quarterly engagement survey. We are also measuring the impact through the 360, and that's going to be one of our metrics of change. So oftentimes people want to know what the dollar amount is. Well, it's very hard to measure the explicit ROI. It's a lot of intrinsic. Are they feeling more confident? And so when I coach managers one-on-one and they're about to have a difficult conversation, the question is, I ask them at the beginning, very simple, how comfortable are you having this critical conversation with someone? And then afterwards, you know, just some Likert scale, light touch. I think the important part is when you're setting up a coaching program to really understand what it is from a company and an organization perspective. What are the strategic goals of the organization that you're trying to impact? That I think it's a lot of that measurement, and the ability to measure is setting it up at the beginning to know what you're going to measure against, and then designing the activities to follow that, but also not to, I hate to say it, not expect a 1-for-1 match. I coached you, therefore you are going to stay. And so some of the other things that we see, it's really hard to measure. It's attribution, retention, mobility, internal, you know, level of ROI and impact on projects. Those are over here. So I like to get a little bit more up close and personal and coach them through a situation. They go do what they said that they wanted to do, and then circle back with them to see how did it feel? What went well? What didn't go well? I love that, what Paul said.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, what about you in terms of evaluating whether or not this coaching was effective? Where do you
Well, I
see?
think in a sales organization, especially, you look at revenues, but it's about more than that. It's about, deal velocity. It's about creating new opportunities. It's about, what are the KPIs and are they improving? Depending on what the people are being coached to, are they improving in those areas based on the business results that they're supposed to achieve? And then if it's a manager, right, like Amy talked about, is there attrition? Is your overall team performing better? If you measure employee engagement with surveys and otherwise, has morale improved? All of these things can be utilized. One of the things I thought was interesting, Amy talked about it and Marla echoed it around when you're being coached, putting yourself out there it can be nerve-wracking, or to be told, hey, you're going to get oversight. If you think of the Hawthorne effect, that just by being observed, your performance changes. And I noticed when I was at Comcast, we did a mentorship program. And when you call it mentorship, and mentorship and coaching isn't exactly the same, so I don't want to sit here and say that they are at all. But it's interesting how, because there are a lot of similarities, when we developed a mentorship program and we had people at the senior levels talking about how mentorship has helped them improve in their careers, people look up and say, oh, I want to achieve similar levels of success. And everybody wanted to be mentored, but it was hard getting people to be willing to do the mentoring. Whereas when we talk about coaching, it's the opposite. And I think there's something to be said around positioning to where you can make it seem like versus I always say, look, coaching is not evaluative. It's developmental. Evaluative means I have observed you and I give you a C or a D or a B. You have been measured. This is just meeting you where you are. And I think I lace my fingers together and say, put your foot in my hands metaphorically, and I'm here to boost you up and lift you up to whatever the next level is for you. Yeah. And it seemed to be received better, and where people realize that grace will be extended, and it's just about helping them achieve higher levels of compensation, be prepared for a higher level of responsibility, and an opportunity comes along. And by positioning it in that fashion, you get more buy-in.
Yeah, I think coaching has been seen, historically as a performance tool. And it's still even echoing with people that really weren't around in the workforce in the 90s. And more and more, I think organizations are trying to show coaching as being something for high potentials. It's a benefit that we give to people inside organizations to be more successful and more happy and more engaged. So, but I do think it still has that a little bit on it. And we have to keep saying, like you're saying, Paul, this is giving you a boost. It's not that you're a problem. This is, and I have to say that often when I'm even contextualizing doing interviews for a 360. This is not for performance. This has to do with high potential coaching and leadership, so yeah, I totally want to echo that.
So I'm going to go off script here because I think there is a very germane question for at least half of our audience. And I think it probably pertains to our entire audience, because either you have coaching in your organization and you'd like to see more of it, or you don't have any coaching in your organization at all and you'd like to see some of it. What are your thoughts and ideas about how somebody from the lower levels of an organization can encourage an organization to bring coaching into their structure? I don't know how to answer it either.
I think first of all, they need to know what it is. They need to know that it's not restricted to, I mean, I've been in the workforce for a little while, and it's always been this executive opportunity. It's always been this really, either you get it paid for by your company because you are a member of the higher ranks, or you pay for it on your own and you have to, it's expensive. Yeah. So I think getting people to think about it as a developmental opportunity and not a punitive approach. Number one, I think that has to be woven in through the DNA of the organization. I think when you are looking at cultural alignment to your coaching program, that it's part of the feedback process. If you don't have a feedback culture, then your likelihood of being able to get that proactive request from people that are early in their careers to be able to ask for it, I think it's on the organization to just put it out there and present it, and to say, here's what we're going to do for you. And specifically where I work, we don't look at leadership from a level perspective. We don't care how long you've been in the workforce, how many people you manage. It's about the behaviors that you demonstrate, how you carry out your work. And it's not just about, and we do a lot more coaching on the how. How did you get your goals achieved? Not did you get your goals achieved? So walk me through the process and how can you either make this go faster, smoother, better next time, and using just that simple methodology of we're an agile methodology tech company, so we leverage a lot of that retrospective Scrum agile methodology. What would you do differently? What's one thing that you might change? And what's really nice about it is when you align coaching with something that they already know. Yeah. I love what you said, Paul. It's teaching, it's mentoring, it's going to help you, demystify what coaching is for people, and they'll walk right in and ask for it. But if it remains this executive thing that's gonna, or I got to coach because I'm not performing well enough. And I think that's where you differentiate for people. What's the difference between coaching to help you get better in the job that you have now, grow in your role, or grow for the future? And being able to give people that language and a framework of what coaching can benefit, how they can benefit, where do they start? I run a program for entry-level kind of early career people, and they are the most curious. They'll ask any questions because they don't have any guidance.
They're great clients.
And such a great coaching come from, right? Mm-hmm. They'll ask the questions. Mm-hmm. And I would say, how do you get coaching to come from the, you're saying kind of bottoms up, is you teach the coach approach. You teach that. And in some organizations I worked with, it's helping everybody have that mindset of how do we enable by asking questions, believing transformation is possible, learning how to listen, learning how not to fix something and give advice, and then helping, even like we had little triads where then those triads had a coach helping them embed those behaviors into their management and or individual contributor roles, and then learning how to coach each other in those small triads. So now we're creating from the bottom up a coaching culture, which is different than having a coach come in, but we're all maintaining this is how we do it. And that's kind of the starter to then saying, I might want my own coach that's just for me. And then that's what starts kind of the coaching as a normal thing. It isn't something that's wrong. You get your own coach, and it just goes on up the chain. And likewise down, people at the top part of the organization having coaching then encourages all to go, what's coaching I might want it.
Yeah. Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add to this thought about how to bring it in if you're in the middle of an organization?
Well, I was going to say, I think emotional intelligence came out. Daniel Goleman's, groundbreaking work came out in the mid 90s, and for 10 years it was just considered kind of fluffy. And then companies like Johnson & Johnson had hard data tied to where it helped revenues. And so at the end of the day, business is about business. So if you can show how it's something we struggle with sales enablement, is people seeing value in enablement as a function. And I think we're finally getting somewhere. We talk about it in the Sales Enablement Society. When companies employ functions like ours, when they employ coaching programs, business results improve, efficiency and effectiveness improves, you generate more revenue. That's what senior leaders care about. And so it's saying when you do this, people are happier, they do more, they become more productive, they generate more, and we're all more successful. And I think it's sending that message so that they'll spend the money on an internal program, external coaches, what have you, because the results are there and they're proven out.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's really great. Go on Google, because there's actually some hard data that shows that it's a way that the company can save money and improve retention, which is pretty mission critical in just about every company. Mm-hmm. Marley, you've got a Q&A thing that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so moving into our next question a little bit with this one. So I'm going to actually steal this question from you as well, David.
Yeah, please do.
And kind of tying it together. So the next question is, what are a few best practices or pitfalls to avoid when coaching or building a coaching program? And we actually received a Q&A from Rebecca that I think ties in pretty well, where they ask, as an external or internal coach being brought into an org to help address real or perceived issues, how do you maintain employee confidentiality? And that is an exceptional part of building in a coaching program. So I figured I'd tie these two together.
Mm-hmm. So what we're taking a look at is the best practices or pitfalls to avoid when building a coaching program within your organization. So what do you have to look out for, and what do you want to bring in? And
I think,
Paul, or you can go jump.
No, go ahead, Marla, or whoever.
I'll just start by saying, for me, it's coming into an organization and doing that work. Whoever's bringing us in, it's to really set the foundation around what confidentiality means. And I think the brighter the line for everyone, because the coachee won't trust me as their coach unless they recognize that what happens in the coaching stays in the coaching, and that we design an alliance and a working agreement that it is confidential, and that the stakeholders that are hiring me to come in, they understand what is confidential and what is not. An agreement is signed by everybody so that we understand what confidentiality is. I think that's crucial, whether it's team coaching, whether it's triad coaching, whether it's individual coaching, because coaching can't happen without that psychological safety. And that's partly why, with the stakeholders, we explain that, and that the coaching won't be as effective. And if it doesn't have that very clear, expressed, written, and verbal conversation around the confidentiality, what's included, what's not, and agreement from everybody.
One of the things that at Acquia we do a lot of is we will run a pilot. We will get a group of people that we know are going to be provide constructive criticism. They end up telling us how they want to roll out the program. They're the spokespeople for the program. So right now we're in the middle of a 4-week pilot, and I think being able to bring in a really great program is getting buy-in, not just from the executives and not just looking at it from kind of the ROI, but when this group of people who are all struggling through the same end of quarter, salespeople, whether they're in customer success, they have that commonality amongst themselves. And when you can do that, kind of that best practice of getting a pilot group of people together, they're making the recommendations, they're building the program, they've got the buy-in, they are the influencers in the organization. Going to that confidentiality perspective, sometimes bringing in the external is the best bet, because really we don't have scale. We don't have enough people in our staff to provide that internal, high touch, individualized professional development opportunity. And that's what we're trying to get to, is really be able to look at this as a development opportunity. So I think being able to bring in something that's going to provide just in time opportunities to people is really important. I think being able to, I did not expect such an uptick and a hand raising from our sales team. It's end of quarter. And they're like, no, I need this. I really want this. And I have to get, going back to what Paul said, the sales managers, they need to know how to get their teams to be a lot more productive and hit the numbers at the end. And what we find is that they become the best spokespeople for the programs. That, I think, is one of the best practices that I find to be really impactful for any program, but really around coaching, because you're touching that third rail issue in some of those conversations, and being able to have a third party, unbiased, external. It's really nice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What I was going to say is, whether, external or internal, regardless, you want to have someone that champions a coaching program, but you also want to make sure that everybody knows that if you manage people, especially, that coaching is part of your job. And so outside of just initiative, it's a skill set that should be considered an imperative as at a point of entry for a supervisory role or otherwise. And so coaching the coach, doing training programs to teach people how to coach, whether you have somebody that's on board as an official coach or not. Someone can own, like I drive coaching programs myself. I don't have a coaching certification, but I've just been doing this a long time, and I've been able to help people achieve results. And so one of the things for me is I've got 93 LinkedIn recommendations. Those are like my Google reviews of people that I've trained and that I've coached. And I say, don't take my word for it. This is what our experience has been. So if we can create even half of the success for you, wouldn't it make sense to teach your people how to sculpt outcomes by improving people's skill sets and those results? Because in sales, oftentimes, when managers will say, absolutely, I coach, but if you ask their people, they say that they don't. And then if you dig into the coaching, it's not professional skills development coaching. It's coaching to dashboards and CRM outputs and forecasting and specific deals. And I'm not saying not to do that. You got to do that. But that doesn't take the place of professional skills development coaching from the human beings that are on those teams to up their skill sets so they have more meaningful conversations that drive business results and influence buyer behavior.
Yeah, here. Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like when we talk about being results oriented, we're looking at the entire result, not just the numbers at the end of the quarter. We're looking at the result in terms of their skill and effectiveness in dealing with other people too.
And
that's
I would
Go
say
ahead.
too, I want to be also a hand up for coaching is about in helping people be engaged and happy in their work and in their life. And I think if we contextualize, because we're in the middle of the Great Resignation, if we're going to just keep driving results, people will go someplace that doesn't feel so stifling. And I'm not saying results aren't important, but the human element has become so much more crucial in a way that it never has been, given where we are right now in the world. And coaching is really a way to help people step back and look at why create those results. How do I engage and be aligned and excited and passionate about the results? It's back to what Paul said around the intrinsics. And I just want to say, I think that, this started out in confidentiality and what we were trying to look at. But I think when we contextualize that this is about making you be more happy and engaged at work, and how do you do that? And how does that support driving your result is a different way of seeing this, I think, given the lens we're looking at now.
Like there is a new kind of movement happening in coaching. It's extending beyond the individual, and people are talking about actually coaching teams and executive groups and even smaller teams within an organization. What are you looking for? If you have experience with this whole team coaching concept, what is the difference, would you think, between a team coach and an individual coach? What kind of extra skills would a team coach need or perspectives?
We've started doing this, and I think it's probably the next, wave of things. And one thing I wanted to nod to Marla was that with everything that's happening, you're no longer just coaching around results. You're coaching the whole person, because they're sitting in their living room, their bedroom.
With their dog running through.
I think the team coaching is something that I learned really early on, and I was fascinated by it. And I think the difference between looking at team coaching and individual coaching is what are the successful drivers of a high performing team? And I really, really like looking at it from the framework of the Patrick Leonci impact of the team. And we're going to start to roll out a team assessment, which will do like a team health check to say, okay, where are we in this triangle of trust and constructive conflict and all of these things, with results only being the end output of all of those different components internally. And I think being able to be a really good team coach, you have to not only be a great individual coach, but you also have to be able to manage a process. And this comes straight out of the facilitative leadership framework that I'm a big fan of from Interactive Associates, which is I need to know when to step out of the content and into the process. Yeah. We're trying to make a decision about X, but the team is falling apart. Relationships are suffering. Somebody's driving too hard on the results without paying attention to the relationship. And I think being an exceptional coach for a team is not only being able to help manage the individual pieces, but take a step back, almost like you're standing in the balcony, looking down and using that power of observation to see where is the dynamic of the team going and how are people reacting to different people. And this was a really interesting exercise that I'll pass along that I learned a long time ago. You know that you're really good at doing that observation. If you're in a meeting, you draw a map on your paper, assuming that how many times and how are people interacting? And how many times are people speaking to each other, speaking across each other, over each other? That'll give you some really good insight into the health of a team. And that's where I say observation and stepping into the process and out of the content.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Amy. I would also add to that, a coach that's able to, like you're saying, step out, but inviting the team to see themselves as an organism, that they aren't a bunch of me's or I's, they're a we, and the we has its own personality. It has its own way of being and interacting because it's an entity, and that the coach can both step into helping the team understand that it's an entity. And then, like you're saying, being able to step out and say, here's what I'm observing. What is the entity observing about itself? And I know that sounds a little strange, but the more the team can reflect on itself and go, wow, I'm noticing people are sitting back. I'm noticing that there's tension. I'm noticing that there's a conflict. Instead of going, I'm noticing Amy's not wanting to be here, it's more being able to look at the team as an organism and total. And the team needs to learn to do that. And I think an effective coach can both model that behavior and coach the team to be its own seeing or its own acknowledgement, and being able to discuss at that systems level what's going on and what does the team want as a behavioral norm. So, yeah.
It's funny, you reminded me, and I think it's definitely congruent, even if it's not exact, but I have a certification as an experiential learning consultant from a company called Project Adventure in Boston. And one of the things we do with teams is you set up activities, and it seems super fluffy, where there are ropes, like you use ropes, like from ropes courses and beach balls and rubber chickens and all this stuff. And it seems kind of goofy and kind of silly. And you have teams, you say, here is a problem solving situation for you to engage in. And it's interesting because people will start going, and the dysfunctions of those teams will come out, where some people will dominate, or people will break off into silos, or somebody feels like they're not being heard. And you'll see it because they won't solve the problem. They won't be able to accomplish the task that's laid out for them. And it's funny because, like Marla, you reminded me, because the most important part of that when you get certified, it's not the activities, it's the debrief. There are people that will be moved emotionally, sometimes to tears, on this is what happened, and I wasn't being heard, or I was ignored, or I wanted to do this. And then you go, does that happen with the team at work? And they go, absolutely. And so you're able to talk through it, and it becomes almost like a therapy session, but you have to do that. And then you come up with group norms of, okay, so we're going to do another activity. What's one thing you as a group are going to agree to do differently? And so these are sometimes as long as 3-day programs. Yeah. But when you get done, the group comes up with, this is how we're going to show up with each other. They line it out, and they come up with the plan for how they're going to be as an entity. And I know this is just one way to do that, but you reminded me of it. And I haven't done one of those programs in years, but they're really powerful when you can get institutions, companies to be willing to give the time, the budget, the people time away from their work to do one of those programs, because the ROI on the cohesion that creates within those teams is really powerful in the outputs that they produce.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to quickly reflect on some of the takeaways that I have coming out of this conversation in sort of like a way of a quick summary. One is what Amy talked about, which was the coach really joins on the journey with the person, and that it's the person's journey, not the coach's journey. That's what's important. The second thing that I want to reflect on is that whole idea that coaching is developmental, and that it's really about the change and growth and humanization and skillfulness of a human interacting with other humans. And it gets measured in results, but it needs to be understood and measured in another way too, which is just sort of an experiential way of how the person is changing their behavior in their world. And what Marla talked about in terms of seeing the team as an organism itself rather than as a collection of individuals. I think those were three really interesting and intriguing ideas. I wanted to let you know in terms of this particular format, our next event is going to be on October 20th. It's going to be called, and it makes a lot of sense considering this conversation, the Leadership Success Factor EQ. And the other thing I want to layer in for the people that are wondering how to get coaching into their organization, soon we will be putting out a book called about focusing on the culture of organizations. It's a conversation between leaders within organizations about what they see organizational culture is. If you're interested in that, please contact us, because I think that would be a useful tool to begin to create a dialogue within your organization about how to bring coaching in. And finally, I'd like to thank you panelists for just giving us a really enriching conversation about the impact of coaching. So now you on this panel and you in the audience, go out there and do great things and unleash the magic in the people that you interact with in your personal life and in your professional life. And let's change the world together.